There is a survival fortress standing in the muddy water of the ditch you drive past every single day. And you have been trained to look right through it. We are conditioned to believe that in a survival situation, or even just in the pursuit of self-sufficiency, we must hunt for meat or scavenge for berries. We are taught that the grocery store is the only place where we can find flour, vegetables, protein powder, and medicine all under one roof. But nature built a department store long before we poured the first concrete foundation. There is a single plant that dominates the wetlands of the world. A plant that provides 4 distinct food groups in one biological package. If you were stripped of everything you own and dropped into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on your back, finding this plant would not just mean you survive. It would mean you live like a king. It offers a root system that produces more starch per acre than the potato fields of Idaho. It releases a golden dust that is arguably the most potent, bioavailable protein source in the plant kingdom. It shoots up green stalks that taste like premium cucumber and asparagus. It produces a fluff that keeps you warmer than wool. Yet, we do not eat it. We do not harvest it. We drain the land it stands on to build parking lots for supermarkets that sell us inferior versions of what we just destroyed. We call it a weed. We call it the cattail. But for 30,000 years, human beings called it the staff of life. The archive opens in the Paleolithic grindstones of Italy, when archaeologists began analyzing the microscopic residue left on stone tools from 30,000 years ago, long before the agricultural revolution and the invention of farming. They expected to find the remains of wild game or simple berries. They assumed that early humans were purely hunter-gatherers who lived hand-to-mouth on whatever meat they could kill. What they found instead shattered the timeline of human nutrition. They found starch grains from times Typha *, the genus of the cattail. This discovery proved that long before we domesticated wheat or rice, our ancestors were processing the massive, starchy rhizomes of the cattail into flour. They were baking flatbread. They were securing a caloric surplus that allowed them to survive the Ice Age. This was not starvation food for desperate times. This was the foundational carbohydrate of the human species. In North America, the indigenous tribes utilized this plant with such sophistication that they had no need for European wheat. They knew that a single acre of established cattails could produce over 6,000 pounds of flour. That is a yield that rivals modern industrial corn farming, but without the tractors, without the pesticides, and without the soil erosion. They knew that the swamp was not a wasteland. It was a pantry that restocked itself every spring. But the cattail is not just a potato substitute. It is a shape-shifting nutritional powerhouse that changes its offering with the seasons. Let me tell you what is actually hidden inside this plant, layer by layer, starting with the gold dust that blows away in the wind every summer. In the early summer, the male flower spike of the cattail releases a dense, yellow cloud of pollen. To the modern suburbanite, this is just allergy season. To the survivalist and the indigenous wisdom keeper, this is superfood gold. This pollen is roughly 40% protein. It contains a full spectrum of amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. It is essentially a naturally occurring protein powder that requires no processing, no extraction, and no industrial chemistry. You simply shake the flour head into a bag, and you have a nutrient-dense flour additive that puts modern soy protein to shame. A person can harvest pounds of this golden dust in an hour, securing a protein source that usually requires hunting or raising livestock. But as you move down the plant, the department store opens its vegetable aisle. In the spring, the young shoots of the cattail, before they emerge from the water, can be pulled up and peeled. Inside is a tender, white core that is known historically as Cossack asparagus. It is crisp, sweet, and tastes like a cross between a cucumber and zucchini. It is rich in vitamin K, vitamin C, and manganese. But unlike asparagus, which requires delicate cultivation, this vegetable grows in the millions in every roadside ditch in the northern hemisphere. And then there is the root, the rhizome. This is the caloric engine. Running horizontally under the mud is a tangled mat of thick, rope-like roots. When you pull them up and peel them, you find a dense, white starch that is gluten-free, high in energy, and incredibly filling. Nutritional analysis shows that cattail rhizomes contain more calcium, more iron, and more potassium than potatoes. But the key difference is the fiber profile. The starch in cattails is resistant and slow-burning. It provides sustained energy without the insulin crash of modern white potatoes. This is the energy source that powered the canoe voyages of the Great Lakes tribes. This is the flour that saved thousands from starvation in the Soviet Union during the Second World War. So, here is the question that should make you angry. If we have a plant that produces protein powder, vegetables, and high-yield flour, a plant that grows automatically in wet areas that we cannot use for other crops, why is it completely absent from the modern diet? Why are we not farming the swamps? Why do we look at a marsh full of food and see a problem to be solved? The suppression of the cattail is a story of land use and the definition of value. The modern industrial economy hates the swamp. You cannot build a subdivision on a swamp. You cannot drive a tractor through a swamp. You cannot tax a swamp in the same way you tax a cornfield. For the last 200 years, Western governments have engaged in a systematic war against wetlands. The Swampland Acts of the mid-19th century in America were explicitly designed to drain these areas, destroy the ecosystem, and turn them into productive dry land. To the developers and the agricultural titans, productive meant dry, flat, and monoculture. A cattail marsh, which produces more biomass per acre than a forest, was classified as a wasteland. They drained the water, they killed the cattails. They paved over the supermarket of the wild to build the supermarket of the suburbs. But there is a darker reason why you cannot simply walk out to the nearest industrial park and start eating the cattails. And this answers the fear that paralyzes so many people when they look at wild foraging. The cattail is a filter. It is nature's kidneys. The biology of Typha is designed to suck up everything in the water and lock it away in its tissues. This is a miracle for the planet, but a hazard for the eater. Cattails are so efficient at absorbing toxic materials that they are used in phytoremediation projects to clean up sewage lagoons, coal ash runoff, and factory waste. They pull arsenic, lead, mercury, and cadmium out of the mud and store it in their rhizomes. This is why the modern narrative tells you to fear the cattail, because we have poisoned the water so thoroughly that the water-cleaning plant has become a toxic sponge. The industry tells you that wild food is dangerous. They are half right. Wild food growing in the mess they created is dangerous. They have turned the ultimate survival food into a biohazard map of their own pollution. When you see a cattail growing in a ditch next to a highway, do not eat it. It is holding the lead from decades of gasoline exhaust. It is holding the runoff from the asphalt. The plant is doing its job. It is protecting the water table by sacrificing itself. The suppression of this food source is a direct result of our abuse of the land. We cannot eat the filter because we have made the water too dirty to filter. But this knowledge is a double-edged sword. If you know where to look, if you know how to find pristine water, the cattail transforms back from a toxic sponge into the staff of life. And its utility goes beyond calories. The you cannot list for this plant is extensive. You cannot freeze to death if you have cattails. The brown, the fuzzy cylinder at the top of the plant explodes into thousands of soft, downy fibers. This fluff has insulation properties that rival down feathers. During World War II, the United States Navy used cattail fluff to stuff life jackets and flight suits because they ran out of kapok. It is water buoyant and incredibly warm. You cannot sleep on the hard ground if you have cattails. The leaves are the perfect weaving material, used for thousands of years to make waterproof mats, baskets, and shelters. You cannot die of a simple infection if you have cattails. The jelly found between the leaves at the base of the plant is a potent antiseptic and analgesic, acting like a natural neosporin and numbing agent for cuts, burns, and toothaches. The cattail is not just a plant, it is a hardware store, a pharmacy, and a grocery store, all wrapped in green leaves. It represents total independence from the grid, and that is why it is ignored. A population that can walk into a marsh and build a house, weave a bed, catch a fish, heal a wound, and bake bread without spending a single dollar is a population that cannot be controlled. They did not suppress it through conspiracy. They suppressed it through the destruction of its habitat and the poisoning of its water source. They classified wetlands as useless because they could not figure out how to monetize a plant that gives everything away for free. But knowledge does not die. It just retreats to the clean places. While the suburbs expanded, the cattail held its ground in the mountain lakes and the remote creeks. In the survival schools of the world, the cattail is still the first lesson. In the high-end restaurants of Copenhagen and New York, chefs are rediscovering the Cossack asparagus and charging $50 a plate for what grows for free in the wild. But it was incomplete. The average person looks at a cattail and sees a prop for a duck, not a lifeline for their family. We were taught to buy fiberglass insulation instead of harvesting fluff. We were taught to buy cornstarch instead of digging rhizomes. We were taught to fear the swamp instead of respecting the larder. That moment of amnesia is ending. The supply chains are shaking. The cost of living is strangling the middle class. The cattail is waiting for the moment we realize that the most resilient food system is the one that builds itself. So here is what you do. You stop looking at the swamp as a place of death and decay. You start looking at it as a vault. But you must obey the rule of the water. This is the most critical instruction for your survival. You never, ever harvest cattails from a roadside ditch, a golf course pond, or near an industrial site. You are not a filter. You do not want those heavy metals in your body. You go upstream. You go to the clean lakes. You go to the mountain beaver ponds. You find the water that you would be willing to swim in. In the spring, you put on your boots. You wade into the shallow water. You reach down to the base of the plant and pull firmly until the white stalk snaps loose. You peel away the green outer leaves until you find the tender, white heart. You can eat it raw right there in the water, crisp and sweet. Or you can take it home and saute it with garlic. It is the freshest vegetable you will ever taste. In the early summer, you bring a paper bag. You bend the yellow-covered flower heads over the bag and shake them. You collect the golden pollen. You mix it 50/50 with your regular flour to make pancakes, biscuits, or bread. You are adding a massive protein boost that turns empty carbs into a complete meal. You brag to your friends that you are eating sunshine gold. In the fall and winter, when the leaves are dead and brown, you go for the treasure. You bring a shovel or a rake. You wade into the freezing mud. You pull up the heavy, rope-like roots. You wash them in the water. You smash them up in a bucket of water to release the white starch. Then let it settle and dry. What you are left with is a pure, high-energy flour that kept your ancestors alive through the Ice Age. You reclaim the name that the developers tried to tarnish. You do not call it a weed. You do not call it a nuisance. You call it the supermarket of the swamp. You call it the survivor's gold. You call it security. Every person who learns to harvest the cattail is one less person who will panic when the trucks stop running. Every family that knows how to turn a marsh into a bakery is a family that cannot be starved out. The plant they drained the land to kill, the plant they poisoned with their runoff, the plant they taught you was nothing but a decoration, Ancient people knew it was the foundation of life. The real estate developers definitely knew it was in the way of their profits. Now you know it is the ultimate safety net. The cattail is still here, standing tall in the water, filtering the sins of the industrial age, and waiting for you to wade in. It can feed you. It can shelter you. It can heal you. If this opened something for you, subscribe. Every share helps preserve knowledge they spent a century trying to bury. The next vault opens soon.